How's everybody doing? I'm Kyle.
Casey.
And we're going to talk to you about some adversaries targeting and impacting OT and ICS infrastructure. We're going to talk about three different groups today real quickly. Most of them are, you can think of it in the sense of like high school sports. You're going to have your freshman, your JV, and your like varsity as far as like sophistication and skill set. So we're going to dive right in. So the first group we're going to talk about is Army of Russia Reborn. I'm going to say CAR the rest of the time. It's easier to say. All we know is like the self-proclaimed hacktivists. They're working with a bunch of different groups themselves. They've actually been sanctioned here by the U.S. Treasury Department in July, and then they lack this sort of OPSEC, or they don't care, right? They post a lot of their face on their Telegram channels. They have this affiliation with No Name. It's my assumption that it's they're partners or husband and wife of the two different groups. And there's this old Z-Pen test group that sort of came out recently as we saw them shift from CAR doing a lot of the ICS targeting and impacting to now Z-Pen test doing it. So digging into more of what they're actually trying to do, this disruption, there's a lot of clout in getting this sort of formal support from the Russian government. There's some likelihood that they're working with GRU. I've also heard recently they might be working with FSB. They're causing disruption. Typically what we're seeing and what I can confirm is that they're accessing a lot of VNC servers. They're targeting VNC servers with these OT and ICS services hanging off on the internet. They're brute forcing. They're using tools like Medusa specifically to automate this brute force login attempts. We know that they have this ICS kill chain stage 2 where they're causing disruption. We don't know if they actually know what they're doing. It's debatable. But if you think about it in the sense of like if they keep accessing the same type of devices over and over again that are on the internet, they're eventually going to become good at what they're doing and have an understanding of these HMI interfaces. They've done a lot of also DDoS attacks against ICS OT entities through August and October. And they're also sharing these playbooks. They're creating these playbooks of how to do this, how to find these devices on the internet using Shodan and Census, and then what they're going to do from there. So talking about sort of their impact, we know in a couple, you can see on the list there, in a couple of incidents, they've actually caused that I'm very, very aware of that they flooded a facility. In one instance where the site engineers had to come in and deal with that. Obviously, no customers were impacted during that time. Another incident here in the States, they actually accessed the device, impacted the pressure of the systems. The site engineers got alerts of this. They came in, they logged into the device. They saw CAR in the device at the same time. They pulled the plug on the device, reconfigured the system to work properly, plugged it back in, and CAR re-accessed the device, and then started changing the settings again. So they obviously pulled it off the internet again, and since then it's been pulled off the internet. So we know that they're having sort of confirmed attacks where they're accessing, manipulating changes in these environments. We know other situations where they've targeted and have no impact, so there's a laundry list of those as well across industries. And then obviously there's ones that we haven't confirmed or don't have that complete insight into probable attacks across, in Europe and in many different industries. So taking a step up from there, we have cyber vendors. Cyber vendors, like the few other talks I talked about today, they are IRG affiliated. We know that their team is a small team, probably less about 10 people, really made up of researchers, infrastructure, individuals, and the operators. So very DevOps tasked. Many of their members have already been sanctioned by the U.S. government, and they've been doxxed, which aligns with the sanctions by a pro-Israeli hacktivist group. They're very geopolitical targeted. They're targeting Israeli-made devices across that. We saw that with their, the Unitronics campaign. I'll talk about that here in a second. But they have, they are doing target. They are disruption. They're causing and impacting them that way. As far as their capabilities are concerned, we know they're on ICS forums asking questions about different PLCs. Hey, how do I upload this file? How do I do this? So they're very inquisitive about those things. Are looking at every OEM vendor out there. So I'm not going to out any of them specifically, but if they're the top players in the ICS industry and like devices, they're definitely researching those. Their infrastructure using Stark Industries a lot. Bell Cloud, coming out of Iranian mobile providers. They move things off infrastructure very quickly. Using Census, OpenAI to do sort of the tooling and development there and finding devices. And looking at the impacts here, we have the Unitronics where they impacted 100 different entities across the world. We know they're compromising devices through the perimeter and impacting, we know, for instance, they impacted an ONG operator. And more recently, and we're digging into this currently now, is that they have a Linux-based malware themselves. So they have impacted fuel pump devices. It's also on a bunch of different devices. We're in the heat of that, looking at that now. We don't know if it's actually ICS malware or not. And before I keep talking and not give Casey any time, and they do a lot of recon and go on from there. So now we're gonna pass it off to Casey.
So Voltite, known by a lot of names, Volt Typhoon, Vanguard Panda, such as that. One of the major differentiators between them and these other two groups that Kyle spoke about is their sustained focus and target on very specific OT-related things. What we've observed is the type of data that they're collecting isn't in the traditional sense of like espionage for espionage purposes. This is espionage for a purpose of creating or developing more intimate knowledge about how specific OT systems work at specific places. And their primary kind of things that they target are project data from OT processes. They target the work logs. They target the alert data, so like what stops a process. They also go after safety system information as well as remediation efforts. So they want to know if something happens to this OT process, what does the operator do to remediate it and get the process back working? There's very few reasons that it's probably just not an intellectual pursuit for them to collect this information. You typically want this information so that you can create a disruptive capability, because you want to know what the operator is going to do when something happens, and also what causes disruption. So that informs how you can craft capabilities. Now, they are very adept at using live off the land type things, as well as a lot of OffSec tools that are open on GitHub. They use one primary, it's called NPS, Network Penetration Suite. Heavily favor that for intranet penetrations. They also love using Impacket. They're also they will heavily use web shells, specifically NeoRegeorge, Godzilla, and ChinaSoap. And they do make use of the botnets that we've been hearing about from like Lumen and Sequoia. They do heavily use those kind of proxy, Soho router, botnet things. And so it really lends a lot of obfuscation to their networks. And not only that, when we go into where they target, so United States, Taiwan, Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, Guam, Palau, Singapore, all those, you can really see where their focus on the OT in those regions are, and like for what purposes they would be for. Largely revolves around the targets that they do, which is where really the linchpins come in, where you have the different interconnected natures between these industries. It's not one specific sector or industry at one time, like with Cyber Avengers, or just random things that they find there. They selectively target certain organizations, especially ones that have relationships to the US military or other militaries from the countries that they target, for the delivery of fuel, typically aviation or naval fuel, as well as the electric and water organizations that deliver water and power to military facilities or to like refineries. They really look at those interdependent relationships. Not only do they go after when they're inside of a network, they go after the customer data. They want to know who is delivering what to who. And the personnel that they target usually has to do with those relationships. So they'll specifically target engineers and plant operators, but they'll target the management. They'll target your NERC-FERC traders that know who and what is being sold. They'll target your government affairs, and they'll target your legal counsel, because those are the places where they'll find the information for the targets that they want. We've observed them targeting not only that specific set where it has like a military government relationship, but they will also target utilities as well as local ISPs that usually have a relationship with like electric ISP relationship around large municipal areas. And they all go after the same kind of data. That kind of data that will eventually, if they don't have it already, that really presents a heightened risk to not only that system, but all those interdependent relationships. So If they take out the power for a refinery, they will stop the delivery of fuel, or if they disrupt water, electric facility can't generate electricity, and then you take out more. A lot of the information that they're collecting is really falling into those lanes, and I think I'm out of time. Thank you.